Welcome to this short video in my Assessing Technical Debt series. This video looks at the final stages of assessment after gathering all the data. So in this case, I have my Excel spreadsheet where I've already gathered the results of the various tooling API queries that I use. You can see I've created a tab for each one: the Apex class, the Apex trigger, my Visual Force pages, my Aura component, my Lightning Web components, and my flows. Thing to note here on flows is I've actually already cleaned this spreadsheet. One of the things I do is I sort by the master label and the status so that I get, the active ones first. I review, and you might notice this potential dupe where I've noted if there are multiple historical versions, because that's another piece of technical debt that I should assess and clean. So once I've gotten that assessment done, I need to note that there are in this org a fair number of flows out there and process builders where there are older versions of the flow still in the org. I should really consider whether I should keep those in there. There might be reasons to do so, or if for my purposes, I need to clean them out. But ultimately, I got to get this list down to one row per flow so that I can assess what is the current active API version. Additionally, as I prepare to analyze my API versions, I'm also going to leave off my process builders because I already know they're a piece of technical debt that I need to convert. I'm also going to leave off flows that don't have, typically never have an API version, like my FSL mobile flows or some of the survey flows, or maybe even those that come from Marketing Cloud into my org. But once I've done that, I also look at older flows where there is no version, and I'm going to put something in there to represent a version, knowing full well that they're very old and they do need to be upgraded to something that has a version. I basically take the results of each of those queries, compile it together into one spreadsheet where I have what kind of thing is this? So is this a flow, an Apex trigger, an OR component, etc.? The name of it, so I know what it is, and what the current API version is. You'll notice I have a few items in here where I actually put UNK in, and those are flows for which there was no known version because they're from before flows were versioned. Once I have those all together, I kind of decide on what I'm looking at. So I'm going to track what is my current API version, which it happens to be 61 today. I'm going to look at how many what is the oldest version number, and anything older than that would be considered more than, in my case, 10 versions old. That's where I'm concerning myself. And I'm going to call those my critical old ones. And I'm going to end up highlighting those blue. So anything up to and including 50 in this case, I'm going to highlight in red. I'm also going to look at the Salesforce recommendation, and the Salesforce recommendation is that you keep things within 2 years of the API, and I'm going to highlight the rest of those yellow. So anything that is newer than that 10 versions old, but more than 2 years old, I'm going to highlight yellow. So in this case, anything 54, 53, 52, and 51. Once I've done that, I compile that. I look at how many total items do I have in the spreadsheet. So how many pieces of programmable code really do I have in my org? And then I'm going to filter and find out how many things have I highlighted red and how many things have I highlighted yellow. So for the things I've highlighted red, there were 259 in this particular org. So 38% of the org has things that are 10 versions or older. Probably should be considered as something that needs to be looked at the very least and potentially brought forward, which may or may not require additional testing and development. Additionally, looking at those that are 2 years or older, so those that are both yellow or red, then the number grows, in this case, to 56%. Obviously, when assessing technical debt, you have to keep in mind the organization you're working in, as well as the circumstances of that code. This gives me a guideline to start with, and then I can determine a path forward and how I want to attack that technical debt, knowing full well that if I know it's going to take me 2 years to review all this code, in that 2 years time, everything else is also going to get older. And that number might go down a little bit, but it might also go up for other records. The second part of this is the other query I ran, which was code coverage, where I get my API classes and triggers, as well as how many lines were covered and how many lines were not covered. With that, I'm going to calculate out the code coverage for each individual Apex class, which is literally just the number of lines covered divided by the sum of the lines covered and uncovered. I'm going to look at how many total Apex classes do I have? What is the total code coverage for my org? And in this case, I'm just summing those values using kind of the same formula, the sum of all the lines covered divided by the sum of all the lines covered plus the sum of all the lines uncovered. I'm assessing this saying, all right, if an individual class is below 75%, I want to know that, and I'm going to call that red. It is perfectly acceptable that an individual class could be lower than that, but I'm just trying to find what is the potential here that I might want to look at. And then I'm also setting a standard within my org of saying that I really want all my classes to be at least 85%. So anything that is below 85%, I also want to count. And I'm going to call that is yellow. And that's really going to be the combination of those that are both that yellow as well as those that are red. So in this org, I've got actually 92% code coverage, with is excellent for an org, but 11% of my classes fall at that below 85% in their individual coverage. And I would really have to review each class to figure out, is that what it's going to be? Because there could be circumstances that mean that for this particular class, it might be very small and I need to accept that one line of code isn't covered for various reasons. Or I could choose to assess that for my debt and work on fixing it. There are also plenty of other things to look at when you're assessing technical debt. While this code coverage is really good, if my tests take a very long time to run, I'm going to need to look at that and then work on fixing that, because that just slows down deployments and the rate at which other things function within my organization. Thank you for watching this. And please feel free to post comments and start a discussion on how do we really assess technical debt and how do we plan for resolving that in the future. Thank you for joining me.